That was, I think, the perfect introduction to our second day of this year's privacy conference. My name is Rebecca Weiss, and I welcome you all back, or I welcome you if you didn't make it yesterday to our conference. I think you already checked out our quite elaborate and quite full program we have prepared for today. So I'd like to give you a brief overview because we have so many sessions that I think we can outline what we will be seeing in the next 8 hours of our program. So first of all, before I do this, thanks to all the participants who already joined yesterday and for all of your very important and very good questions that you sent to us in the chat or in various messages. We are always trying to get all of your questions in. We might not always be able to due to the time, but please feel free to take your questions and maybe discuss them amongst yourselves in the group chat or in messages, because you can contact all of the other participants and also all of our speakers in the community section. And our conference is here to open the discussion. We always want to enable all of you to take part in a constructive dialogue. We're always trying to bring everybody to the table, and your questions and your insights are absolutely essential to do so. So please feel free to discuss everything you want to discuss, post questions or share insights in the various chat and communication features we offer on our platform. So for our program today, we have prepared 7 sessions on this main stage today. So we'll be seeing a lot of presentations touching upon the issues that the Commissioner Reinders also just mentioned. So we'll be looking into new regulation, the new data framework. Also, we'll touch upon German regulation. So I think quite a few of you will be interested in that as well. And we'll get industry insights, because that's always one of the goals we are trying to achieve with our privacy conference. We want to enable all of you to learn from the best, learn from solutions that are already available in the market. So we'll all take part and be productive in the data economy when we use tools or we enable new data processing or are using new technologies. So after those sessions on the main stage here today, we'll be having a short break, because breaks are also important. Please feel free to stay on the platform and use the chat, connect to other participants in the community section. But also take some time to take a breather, because there's quite a lot of program coming up after our lunch break as well. Because as you can see in the program, there are actually 4 parallel stages after lunch. We'll be talking about ways toward new cooperation. That will be here on the main stage with me. I will be talking about data security and cloud. On our second stage, we have a third one prepared for the most important topic. We talked quite a lot about it yesterday, about international data transfers. And we have one German-speaking stage as well this year. It's called Datenschutz Made in Germany. So you'll be having the opportunity to listen to German speakers, especially from the data protection authorities, on our 4th stage today. So those parallel streams will be active till 4:30, and then we'll take a quick breather again until we meet back at 5 p.m. for the last 4 sessions of today. And one additional tip, if you send in questions in the various chats that you can find on Swapcard, you will notice, especially if you already joined us yesterday, that the chat for a specific session is only active as long as the session itself is active. So if a question doesn't get answered during the session, please absolutely feel free to post it in the group chat, because maybe you'll find someone who can answer it over there. And as I already mentioned, you can also contact our speakers. So that's that's all for the introductory remarks from my side for today. So yeah, let me introduce our first speaker on the main stage. I'm very happy that he is taking the time. Andreas Hartl will give us an overview over the data economy and the development and changes in the political and regulatory environment. Andreas Hartl is from the German Federal Ministry for Economic Affairs and Energy. So I think he's excellent introductory speaker for our main stage here today. Andreas Hartl, thank you so much for taking the time. I'll be giving the floor to you at first, so you can give our audience an overview and share your perspectives, and I think we will have some time for questions after your introductory remarks.
Rebecca, many thanks for having me. Many thanks for the invitation, and to Bitkom for organizing this great event. I think it's very good timing. The Commission is in the delivery phase. What is a bit challenging for me is when it comes to a maybe domestic outline or outlook, what will happen with the German government. I think that is to be expected, how things develop in Germany the next weeks. So thank you. Andreas Hartl is my name. I'm head of the division AI1, artificial intelligence, data economy, blockchain. What I think what is very great about the tasks of my division is that, in a way, the data economy is at the bracket for two very important technologies. And I'm currently heavily involved also in the deliberations in the Council on the AI Act. But I think today we will have a closer look on what's happening in the data policy arena. Let me first start maybe with the comment that my impression is that more and more the digital policy debate is shaped by the data policy debate. And I think that's a natural development in a way, because people more and more notice that access to data is key for technologies. Data fuels business models, data fuels current value to be created. And of course, there's a lot of political debates about who should use data, sometimes also who should own data. And I think what is also very important to understand is that, and I mean, this is the privacy conference from Bitkom, that the debate is very much dominated by the perspective of the GDPR. That's really something I would not see too negative, because I mean it's quite natural. The GDPR is maybe the first really legislation in Europe on data, and I think that what we see at the moment is that there are several legislative initiatives to further evolve and put forward the framework for data use. And what I think is also quite, in a way, natural is that you start with a fragmented approach. I started my career with the telecom regulation, and also there was that idea of open network provision when it comes to liberalizing state monopolies. The word of fragmented legislative acts. Now we have the European Electronic Communications Code. I think this, step-by-step approach is quite prudent. But what we see, as indicated, is that we started very much with also open data or the Public Sector Information Directive that evolved over the time to an open data directive. What we also see at the moment, of course, is a next step with the Data Governance Act. We are waiting forward, if I may call the DGA, the antipasti for the data debate. I think the Data Act will be the main course we are all waiting for, and hopefully people have not eaten too much in the Data Governance Act, and maybe it's still heavily digesting. I will come to where the situation is right now as far as I can. And of course, also, other important legislative acts as the Artificial Intelligence Act, because there are also a lot of requirements to be discussed when it comes to high-risk AI systems that are, it's quite obvious, depending to a large extent on data. We also have the Digital Markets Act, where also some access obligations are included for gatekeeper provisions from Gatekeeper, and maybe also the Digital Services Act when it comes to which content is legal. I think that is also one of the bigger picture when it comes to the current data policy approach. And I would also like to start with the obvious elephant in the room. When we see that we are ahead of the Trade and Technology Council of the EU with the United States, and data will play a role, also artificial intelligence and standardization. And of course, what I mean is that after the decision of the European Court of Justice on Privacy Shield, Schrems 2, there's a certain state of unclarity, and of course it will be of paramount importance to see how we will find a solution for businesses there, so that there is more legal clarity in data use and data exchange. And it is currently a high-profile issue for the UK G7 presidency. We are heavily debating also the framework there, and of course it will be left to the new German government, but we are also preparing, of course, at the moment, ideas for the German G7 presidency next year. So there's a lot going on currently in the data policy arena globally, and of course in Europe. And also to mention that, then I would like to go a bit more into detail when it comes to the European legislative acts. I would also like to underline that also the national debate was in the second half of the term of the current still government, the data policy, the data strategy, that was also very important to find a common ground, and in a way a line to follow for all governments or ministerial departments involved. And I think what is really important is that the government put availability of data and usage of data into the main focus of the data strategy. So Rebecca, I think maybe two quick remarks on maybe the Data Governance Act. The current the state of play is that I think the European Parliament has done its work, and it will formally decide its mandate, its position for the trilogue discussions coming ahead. This very Friday, October 1st, we will have a meeting of the COREPER, the Committee of the Permanent Representatives, and the Slovenian presidency, after intense discussions, tabled a proposal, and we have to see. I'm quite optimistic that there will be then a mandate also from the Council for the trilogue, and I'm really looking forward to see that discussion develop a bit more. So in a nutshell, maybe the Data Governance Act has three major pillars. One is Chapter 2, a framework for the reuse of data that is not open data, but is, and I like the idea or the model of the London Open Data Institute very much, that there's closed data, shared data, open data. So for open data, we have the Open Data and Public Sector Information Directive. But Chapter 2 of the DGA is trying to support that closed data for good and legitimate reasons can be made shared data. And what, of course, we as Germans like very much is that one of the blueprints for the Commission was the German Forschungsdatenzentrum. So maybe the best translation would be a research data center. And the German word Forschungsdatenzentrum was heavily used in the work of the Council Working Group, and also in within the like-minded group, the Friends of the Data Economy. I think what's really important to know there is that there will be no obligations for member states to make more data available, and there will not be an obligation on providing rights for the reuse of data. So that's the major difference to the Open Data Directive. Open Data Directive also no requirement for member states to make data available. But when data is available because of individual entitlements like sunshine laws, or because of rules that governmental agencies should provide data, if they make them public, then users have the right to use them. But in the DGA, it's a different approach. And I think that's because of the nature, the character of the data we are talking about. They are not available for good reasons, because there are trade secrets, commercial secrets, or the protection of privacy, of course. But the important thing is, I think, that we have a discussion on how to facilitate by means of a data research center, by support for making, to at least be able to use aggregations of data for the follow-up, for the reuse, is an important issue. And I think one driver, I think, was the Corona pandemic, where it became obvious that data is very important, not only to fight the pandemic and the virus, but also to, and that's the whole idea of open data, to have a better fact basis for more effective and more appropriate decisions. So open data is about better decisions. And that is why open data and providing more data is very important, not only for policymakers, also for companies, of course. So the second major pillar of the DGA is Chapter 3, the data intermediation services. And there also it was created as a framework to enable those services by providers of data intermediation services, and not to decide on specific rights to access data or obligations to make data available. It was important from the position of the European Commission to tackle the issue of especially trust of data holders, or in the wording of the GDPR, data subjects, to give them more trust to make their data available, and to see data intermediation service providers as origins of trusted, maybe, or as trusters, maybe also with a fiduciary obligations, so that these providers of data intermediation services can then facilitate more data exchange, more data access, and more data use. I think what we saw is that the requirements were heavily discussed. Also, the borderlines to the GDPR. I mean, it was made very clear that the GDPR shall prevail when there's a conflict, and that was, I think, also in the council working discussed if there should not be any more room to facilitate the execution of rights by data subjects a bit more. But I think what we saw is that the majority thought that, of course, the GDPR is in effect and should prevail if there's a conflict in applying the stipulations of both regulations. And there was also a discussion on the degree of neutrality. Neutrality as an instrument to create trust as a prerequisite for voluntary data sharing. We had large discussions to the amount of what kind of independence is necessary. So according to the proposal by the Commission, we had that in Article 11.1, it said at a certain time that it should be a legally separate structure. Then it was for a couple of weeks legally independent structure. I mean, that's, I think, not a secret. The last proposal is legally separate structure again, and the purpose limitation also. And yeah, I mean, of course, that was discussed, and especially as far as I noticed, the like-minded group. So the Netherlands, Denmark, Sweden, Finland, Austria. That was, as far as I observed, something that was discussed. If this trade-off of requirements and also leg room for innovations, and I think that is a permanent discussion for permanent trade-offs. We see in the data arena. Yeah, and the third major pillar, data altruistic organizations, that was, according to the intention of the Commission, rather directed at non-commercial services. And that is also something that is now in the proposal from the presidency, that the data intermediation services shall be commercial on a commercial basis, while the data altruistic organizations shall be, according to a voluntary labeling scheme, apply for that label, and then that serve as a foundation of trust to provide data. Some call it donation of data, or whatever. So yeah, these are the three major pillars. Complementing the idea of reuse of open data by facilitating the reuse of closed data, and the data intermediation services by commercial providers and by data altruistic organizations. I think it will be very interesting to see how the trilogue will develop, and especially when at some time the Data Act will also be tabled. So then we will have a bit kind of a more full picture of what the complete legislative framework will look like. And I'm really looking forward to the proposals. I think there is one very interesting study commissioned by our distinguished colleagues from the Federal Ministry of Education and Research on access rights from research organizations or from researchers. I think that it's really not, so a big surprise that I would also assume that this will be an important building block of the Data Act. I would at least expect that. And I'm of course really curious to see what the Commission will propose when it comes to government to business sharing. So reverse TSI, as some call it, especially in a horizontal approach, Rebecca. I think that, I mean, when it comes to obligations in a subordination relationship, to find a solution that apply for several sectors, I think is a real challenge, and I'm looking forward what the Commission will be able to propose there, and of course also B2B data sharing, and surely also relations, business data sharing involving consumers. So I think still in a way impressed by the debates we had on the Data Governance Act. I'm really looking forward to what the main course will look like after that heavy antipasti. I don't know. I could go on for hours, but maybe, I don't know. It's a good time to leave it with that. I really hope that there are some questions or remarks also from the audience, and of course from you, Rebecca. So maybe that as a starter. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I could definitely listen to you for a few more hours, because I think you made the regulatory framework quite clear in an excellent way, because if you don't really know your way around all the new regulation, it gets so confusing so fast, because we are talking about DMA and DSA and DGA and DA and GDPR and e-privacy and B2B and G2B, and it's all very confusing if you're not doing a good job, but you did it excellently. So thank you for that, first of all. We do actually have a few questions in the chat. I have a lot of questions in my head as well, but maybe we can start with one from our audience, because what I think you outlined is that there is a will to bring change to the data economy, but always without touching the GDPR framework. And one viewer is actually asking, do you think that B2B data sharing and data use can actually be increased without modifying the GDPR, given its all-encompassing scope? And I think that is always and will always be the deciding question in the data economy moving forward. So I'd be happy to hear your views on that.
Thank you. Just as a disclaimer, I'm not necessarily will tell you what is the formal position of the federal government or of my ministry. So if you allow me, I would take a rather personal opinion there, of course, but of course as an interested and follower of the discussion. So I think that is, the key issue, the trade-off between the European way, which I also personally subscribe to, and I don't want to live in a world where privacy is not protected, and I think that is not the case. Not every discussion about privacy is an attack, and maybe sometimes you could also have the perspective that a more effective privacy approach would be a higher degree of factual protection of data, and not the level of legislative achievement, I think, is important. At the end of the day, it comes down to how people are aware of their own data protection. Is trust really an issue when you see that many services are used? And I would say that the subscribers do not necessarily rely or trust these services they're using. So there is, the picture has to be a bit broader. The second thing I would like to say is that the GDPR, and I would also subscribe to that, is a milestone in the data policy debate globally. I mentioned that, you know, in also several travels I had globally, that of course you are approached on that, and people have a high it's highly reputed. So, but I mean the discussion is very dynamic. It's not a static thing. And when the GDPR was deliberated by the co-legislators, I mean that's 5 or 6 years ago, and that feels like a decade in the digital, at least as a decade in the digital policy arena. So I think what I would just like to see is an open-mindedness and more calm when you discuss things. Third thought from my side on that. I think we have to find a solution for international and especially transatlantic data flows. And I mean, of course, the GDPR is in effect, and authorities, data protection watchdogs, they have to implement it and abide to the letters of the GDPR. I fully understand that. But, you know, maybe another perspective. We as Europeans expect others to be adequate to what we as Europeans think is the best approach to data protection. You know, I see that maybe that is a good starting point, but will it be the final wisdom? I don't know. But I think it's on the table now for the European Commission, also for the US administration. And I think it's very interesting to note that sometimes I have the impression that Sacramento is closer in terms of data geography to Brussels than Washington, DC. And of course, noticing that the Vice President of the United States, Kamala Harris, she was the Attorney General of California when there were substantive progress made or prepared in data protection. Maybe there's an open door now. And this is why I'm really relieved that the TTC will take, and that we will be able, as Europeans, the European Commission is in the driver's seat there, but that we will have a discussion. And also globally, maybe we should discuss if adequacy is the best path, or maybe approximation of approaches is something that should be discussed. Yeah, maybe that as an answer to what was mentioned. But again, I'm just a career official. I'm not a policymaker, and of course that is a trade-off between innovation and protection of fundamental rights that has to be done by policy makers that are legitimated for that. I can only give advice. I can only provide food for thought. And yeah, I hope that we will have, again, a more calm, a more open-minded discussion. And well, maybe one remark. I think that I would subscribe to what Ulrich Kelber, the German data protection federal watchdog, says, that if, you know, the GDPR, if businesses apply to GDPR, there is a lot is possible. I would subscribe to that, but I would subscribe also to the thought that achieving that situation for many companies is because of the complexity of GDPR, a matter of high transaction costs. And what I see is that there are some inertia effects that companies refrain from trying to be GDPR compliant just because they don't see the benefit at the end of the day, because it's very cost effective. And this is why I would also like to see that there's more, and I think that's also the position of data protection watchdogs in Germany, to have a better human resource capacity to be not only the watchdog, but to be also the partner of businesses, the partner of the economy, so that we achieve the common goal, that we have the best services and the best data protection, both in common in place.
Thank you so much, Andreas. I think you outlined how difficult the debate actually is regarding more data use, a thriving data economy, but in all the restrictions and rules the GDPR is giving us, but also all the potential for businesses that is still encompassed in the GDPR, because it also brought harmonization, and it was indeed a milestone. You were absolutely right about that. I see a few more questions in the chat, but unfortunately we are already out of time. But as I seeing those questions, we will have the possibility to address them later today, actually, because Malte Katzenberger from the EU Commission will be here with us talking about the DGA and the DA and the data intermediation services at some length. So I'll just be taking your questions with me, dear audience. I'm thanking you, Andreas, for taking the time today. I think we will meet again soon and talk about how the DGA and the DA will develop in the future. I really like the mental image you painted with the antipasti and the main course, so I'll be remembering that. Thank you for today. If you have some time, please feel free to stay on the platform. Otherwise, see you soon.
Thank you. I appreciate it, and have a good conference.